You are now listening to the Young Black and Figuring It Out podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at YoungBlackFIO or on Facebook at Young Black and Figuring It Out. For all questions or inquiries, send your emails to ybfpodcast20@gmail.com. But if you really want to make a statement while showing your support, go to www.youngblackfio.com to purchase some merchandise. We truly appreciate your love and support. On behalf of the YBF team, thank you.
What's good, y'all? It's your boy Herb.
And it's your girl Mo.
And welcome to our soon-to-be
world-renowned
podcast,
Young, Black, and Figuring It Out.
What up, though?
What it do?
Whatever we tell it. We a little rusty at that, Wes. That's what I'm saying. We came out the gate. We got to stretch. It's our first episode back, y'all. Man, okay. I'm like, what's my lines again?
No, we got to stretch.
Yeah. What's good, though?
Oh, life is wondrous.
A lot going on. But we are back. People have been asking, like, yo, when y'all coming back? I was in, Wakeman's, you see everybody. So I tried to go mad late where I wouldn't see anybody, and I saw everybody. It's like, dang, even this don't work. So we're in there, and he stopped me. We having a conversation, me in person. I'm going to put your name on blast. And we was out somewhere in Vermont. Okay.
Yeah.
So we out there.
Where we live, of course.
Where we live in Vermont, y'all. So he out there, like, yo, let me show you something. So he scrolled through his text. This literally happened yesterday, or 2 days ago. And he's like, look, I'm a fan. He was sharing the podcast to somebody else. Yeah. He's like, when y'all coming back? I'm like, listen, October, we got y'all.
Shout out to whoever that is. We thank you.
Yeah. So here we are in October, ready to make this happen.
Welcome back, everybody.
All right, good. So you know how we usually do. First of all, let's just acknowledge this is season 5.
The best number out there. Yeah.
5 years?
5 seasons.
Well, 4 years.
5 seasons.
Yeah, we had that whole argument. It's okay, y'all. This is the 5th season. We're excited to be back. It's been a lot of good content. Appreciate all the listeners and supporters.
Yes, we love
YBFers, all that good stuff.
Deeply.
Yes, and so we're excited for the season. We got a lot of great episodes in store, including today's episode. Now, normally, we would do what did you figure out this week?
Yes, we would.
But today we ain't got time for that. Why we
ain't
ain't got time for that?
Nobody got time for that.
Why we ain't got time for that?
We have a fantastic special guest in the house.
Yes, Dr. Chanel Guzman. Can we clap it up over here in the building, please? Go ahead, introduce yourself again.
Hello, I'm Chanel Guzman, and I'm very happy to be here and connecting with you today.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. We're excited to have you here. So we are ready to get it cracking.
Yes.
Okay. I was looking at y'all faces like y'all about to say something. I don't want to cut nobody off because you will let me hear about it.
He does it all the time.
I know, I'm back. So today we're here to talk about reclaiming history and why Indigenous Peoples Day matters. So if you all look back and think about the conversation we had, canceling Columbus, I don't even like saying that name. That was a deep conversation both on the podcast and on Facebook.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was. So we are back to talk about this in a different way, to not talk about why we're canceling what should have never started, but why we should be celebrating what should have started originally.
Exactly.
Right? So we're here to talk about that. We'll go through some questions, have some good dialogue. We got an expert in the room, and so we're excited to do that. Yeah. So we actually want to start off maybe with a little bit of context. So I'll share. This is from research. We got our research from one of our favorite sources, one of our partners to help us do this work. Who we get our research from?
ChatGPT.
We love
It's our
Chat.
bestie at this
We
point.
love Chat. He actually can do the voice now, and my Chat got the black woman voice, so I feel comfortable every day. All right, you ready
You're
for this?
welcome.
Yes.
On behalf of all of us.
Is that you? Are you ChatGPT?
Again, you're welcome.
You're funny. Okay, so again, Indigenous Peoples Day actually, people look at it as a response to Columbus Day, and I don't think it was really like a counter holiday. I actually think it was people recognizing what should have been. So it was a chance for us to recognize the harms and painful history of dispossession suffered by folks. And so now that that's the case, I think people are realizing, instead of, again, celebrating something that actually has some horrific, tragic history to it that we need to celebrate and honor and recognize what's going on in history, right? And so that actually started, it was like the United Nations that brought that forward years ago to be like a national holiday or a global holiday. And it's actually still not in America a federally recognized holiday.
Very disappointing.
Yeah.
Not surprising.
Yeah, not surprising. But it actually was first adopted, and this is going to be like a really, in South Dakota in 1990.
That actually makes sense.
Does it?
I would think so.
It's a big indigenous population there.
High
Oh,
population.
snap. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. We'll take that. Good. See, you learn something new every day. Yeah, the more you know. And so the movement has grown across the U.S. So people who, even if it's not recognized by your state, people recognize it as that. And I actually felt great comfort. I was having a conversation, and someone like mentioned that the day as Indigenous Peoples Day, it just came out naturally. It wasn't like you had to think. It just, that's what the day is. You know what I mean? And that's what I think it should be. So yes, so that matters for many of reasons, what you're here to talk about today. But before we even get into our questions, I want to ask, China, anything you want to add to the context that Chad and I drummed up?
I think this is a great context. I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah. So
Love it.
why do you think it's important that we kind of shift the focus away from Columbus Day, to Indigenous Peoples Day?
I think awareness is big. Like, you think about what you teach children and what they grow up learning and knowing and understanding, and kids will listen to whatever they're told.
Right.
So a lot of what we were told growing up in school has been why Columbus is so great and how he founded here and da-da-da-da, and all these lies. So I think it's really important now to discuss the truth and bring more awareness so that we know there's high populations of Indigenous people in South Dakota,
Right,
and that
yes.
you just don't just think they're on reservations somewhere and not know where those places are, So that was not judgment or shade.
Nah, it's a little bit of shade.
I wasn't
you feel
trying
me?
to be shady.
I ain't mad. Listen, I'm humble, y'all. I'm learning too. But yes. So then what you think?
I think maybe now that I'm here and us moving forward, I'm gonna step back a second and give a little bit more context. So
Yes.
I am an Indigenous American person. My father is Huichol and Gabrielino. I am Huichol and Gabrielino. Those are my tribes. And so this is something that I think about personally. I think my personal experience is what makes me any level of expertise I have rather than any learned expertise. So I'm largely speaking out of my personal experience and my personal understandings of things. But I think what you said, Monique, is exactly what it is. We're storytellers. Like as a species, we tell stories across cultures, across contexts and civilizations. We are storytelling beings. And so the stories that we tell help us understand who we are and how we are and what we are in relation to each other, in relation to the earth, and in relation to all things that exist. And so the stories we tell also show the things that we value as a society. And largely we tell stories about war and possession and taking. These are the things that we commemorate and that we glorify. And I think that there's a lot to be explored there. But taking that aside, if what we tell stories about is what we value, then it is really important what stories we're telling so that we are aligning our storytelling with our values, and so that we are communicating to each other now, to each other in the future, what it is that matters to us. And so I think imagining Indigenous Peoples Day as a correction, like we all make mistakes and we're all learning and growing all the time. So like we did this thing, this was a story that we were telling, this was the story that was important to us. And then we learned more, we knew more, and we realized the story actually isn't the story that authentically explains what's happened here. And so now we have a chance to say, I know more, I can do better.
Right.
And now we course correct and we tell the story that happened. We tell the story not only from this perspective, but from more perspectives. There's always going to be more to say if you're broadening what you're looking at. And so I think that imagining Indigenous Peoples Day as a broadening of what we're looking at and aligning our storytelling with our values, that to me makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. That does make sense too. And I also think it's like a chance to, I think it's important that we also hold our nation accountable to what it's done and what it continues to do, you know? And there's like multiple instances throughout history where we like go throughout and the truth has been whitewashed and changed in a way that it's like, now, you know, it could be like unintentional and we tried to, it's like, but at this point there's so much going on where it's like, you know, this is a pattern. Like, it feels like this is what America does. And so it also is a chance for us to say, hey, we got to start to reconcile some of these things. Like as this comes up and this Indigenous Peoples Day, we have to think about why is it that and why is it not Columbus Day? It's like, yeah, there's some atrocities that we have not atoned for, that we have not reconciled, that we continue to do as a nation. And we definitely have to like course correct, like you said in that. And then also part of that course correction is like reconciliation. Like what are we going to do to help restore? And I think that's like a global responsibility, you know, because like we are one community. That's how I look at it, with multiple facets, and we definitely have to like come together to say this is wrong, and this is a wrong that we all exist, especially in America. We exist here because of these wrongs that have happened. What are we all going to do to help like elevate the folks who are impacted by that? You know, so yeah, whenever I hear Columbus Day, it's like a little bit of anger for me, or Indigenous Peoples Day. There's like also some anger, like, man, I can't believe like this happened, and the history behind that. Like, wow, you know?
Anger's meant to protect us. That's like a protective emotion. It tells us you can't trespass here. And if something's bringing up anger, that means that there's some sort of feeling of invasion or compromise of safety. And I think that that's really important to acknowledge and think about when we're talking about the way we want to tell this story. Is like what emotions does it bring up, and what do those emotions tell you about the experience? You know, the logical, factual side of the experience, the emotional side of the experience, the spiritual and integrated and wisdom sides of the experiences. And I think that if you look at all of it, you mentioned talking about perspectives. I don't remember exactly what you said, but it got me thinking about a conversation I had with a friend of mine who's a teacher. He teaches 5th grade, and he's brilliant and kind and smart, and has taught me. He teaches 5th grade.
Shout out, more power to you.
We appreciate your service.
He's an exceptional teacher, and one of the things he was talking to me about was like some of his lessons. And so for the Indigenous Peoples Day lesson, the way that they do it is they read these 2 different books. There's this one book, and it's told from the perspective of I would say the colonizing power. And then there's this other book, and I believe it's called Encounter, and it's told from the perspective of the Indigenous people in their first encounter with the colonizing powers. And the way that those stories differ, and then they invite the children to have a conversation and to try to understand the differences, and where like the plot points, what happened, where those align, and then like where the experience of that diverge, or the interpretation of that diverges, and like what does that actually mean about it. And again, I think it's looking at it from a storytelling perspective. History is told by the people who are in positions of power to do the telling.
Yes.
And so the history that we hear, the history that I heard my whole life was different than the history I heard at home and with my community and with my family, where I'd go to school and we'd be saying these things, and I'd come home and my father would be like, And so then I go back, I try to take that to school, I try to tell people, and my teachers were like, detention. Yeah. So it was like, you know, this kind of confusion in the storytelling without space for the different experiences and perspectives and realities. And I think that the idea that we can tell a story factually with no bias or emotion is inaccurate. We're not able to do that. But when we are able to look at everything, I think about it like informed consent, you know, like, do you know all of the pieces of the story that you're talking about? And if you don't, like, learn more pieces of the story so that you can be informed in whatever story you're going to choose to tell.
Yeah. With that in mind, do y'all think like it's this might be a both type of response, but is it important for us to like lean into the truth of what happened and what was going on, or even really like celebrate Indigenous peoples like on the day or around that, right? Or is it more important to like outside of the celebration to look at the like atrocities that happened and look at that, or is it all of the above?
I mean, I would think, because I like the perspective of sharing the different perspectives and like the two authors and how important that is. I think seeing it all whole picture from various perspectives is helpful, because if I think about how the media has portrayed it over the years and you're a young person not knowing any different, it's like Pocahontas, Indian in the cupboard, all these problematic things. And I will say, I only recently learned this year because of someone I know sitting across from me that Twilight was poorly depicting all things about Indigenous people. I had no clue. So I think it's really important to see the bad, the good, and from all sides. You know, like it gives you a full picture where that informed consent comes in, because now I can formulate my own understanding of what fully happened.
I think that the factual piece of it is crucial, and I think that the emotional piece of it is crucial, and I think that imagining, like at first, when Indigenous Peoples Day was, I think it was 3 years ago, when President Biden said, like, we're going to acknowledge this, didn't declare it a federal holiday, but, you know, made a declaration of acknowledgement. I was mad because I was like, don't give me some performative stuff, like to replace something that has been rubbed in our face hurtfully for, you know, ever. Don't perform reverence, live it, and that's different. You're just putting a different word on top of another word and calling it a day. But then I spent more time thinking with it and sitting with it and gathering more information and looking at different perspectives. And I think that what I also value about it and feel differently about it now is what we have the invitation to do in Indigenous People Day is to celebrate the resilience of Indigenous peoples across the Americas. So rather than being about any replacing or any performing, it's about telling a story of a people who, through systematic, targeted, structural, repetitive interventions and attempts to take away and eradicate really a language, a tradition, a culture, a spirituality, and an entire existence of people, you know, through different things like the Indian Removal Act and through, you know, American Indian boarding schools and through all of these very specific government interventions to eradicate us. We continue to tell our stories, live our culture, live our tradition, and that resilience, having all of those things taken away in the beginning of that dispossession and dehumanization and genocide, starting with, you know, Columbus. But instead of focusing on that, looking at the resilience that we get to see in our people because of that, I think that shift in focus, that shift in value and storytelling is really important.
Yeah, and even as a, and not to censor this, but as a Black man, it's like there is like the formula like you just mentioned. So erasing language, getting rid of land, like destroying culture.
Get rid of religion.
Embedding religion, and then imposing the whiteness, think about white supremacy, into that is like a formula that is like replicated throughout. Like, so in West Africa, and really all throughout Africa, the Caribbean, it's now known as America. Like, that's the same formula, you know what I mean, that's happened. And so, like, hearing that, it's like, oh, there's, like, some connection from, like, minoritized folks that, like, can connect in that way, sadly, in many ways, right?
Trauma bonding?
Which is why people look at, like, people would say BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, because they're giving homage to, like, there's some differences in the way people showed up here, honestly, or the way that people had to exist in America, you know? And so like hearing that, it's like, oh yeah, there is some similarity into what we're describing. The other thing I wanted to ask, I want to walk this back. There's a bunch of questions coming from not even the questions that we have here. So I'm going to get back to the ChatGPT questions, but let me ask these questions. I feel like and I don't know all, so I'm putting myself out there as this is a risk. So put out there. I don't know all of the information around what happened in Germany, but I look at things like what happened with reparations for many Jewish folks. So there was like actually I might even be able to look this up. The Luxembourg Agreement in 1952 actually gave over $3 billion to folks who were like victims of really genocide in Germany, right? And then many individuals got payments as well to kind of signify like reparations, right? That maybe on a smaller scale, maybe, but that largely did not happen for Black and Indigenous folks.
No. Isn't it also illegal to have the swastika all around Germany and whatnot?
Right, yes,
yeah.
right,
like, yeah.
yes.
Like they
yes.
actively
even symbolic things like it's like, no, this is not okay. As to where like General Lee is all up on statues. Okay. So
but that's an American hero. So anyway.
So I say all that to say, like, do we, and when you have time to prep for this question, this is off the cuff, like, does that lack of like economic reconciliation, do we think impacts the way that we even like view things like Indigenous Peoples Day or Black History Month or whatever it might be? Because it's like, what did you do just from outside of performing actual substance? You know what I'm saying?
I mean, we show what we value culturally. We show that. We make it very clear. Where we put our power, that's what we are valuing, right? So you can see the ways that we value storytelling. Look at the way that we engage with the entertainment industry. Like there are people who we are showing how deeply we value what they do with our financial investment, our energetic investment, our time investment. This is what I value. And so when talking about reparations, and not just financial, but any sort of reparations, but that says what we value. If I am not going to put my power and, finances, money, that's just one manifestation of power. If I am not going to put my power behind this thing, but I am putting my power here. I can tell you all day that I value this thing over here, but I'm showing you right now, today, every day, this is what I value. This is where I'm putting my power and my time and my energy. So yes, I think that financial reparations are always a part of the conversation. I think cultural reparations are always a part of the conversation. And I think even just in the broader context of our society, the way that we speak about our values and the way that we live our values are in such bleak contrast that it's very clear that this is not something as a society we value.
Right. I'm thinking for the little bit of news that I've watched, because I stopped watching news at a certain age for fear of trains. But anyway, I can recall things having to do with like pipes and oil in certain parts of the country, and the indigenous population fighting and advocating and protesting the stop of it, and the government just saying, who cares about your land, and running through it to take the resources and everything. So it's like everything you're saying is like they have shown what they value, and it's not people, it's not indigenous people, it's not rights, it's not land, it's not anything sacred, it's nothing that has to do with anything more than money. I'm like, just angry, just see things,
Yeah, and I even think when I go to like, and it's not as if the government or powers that be don't recognize that that's a huge thing. And I always go back to finances because she knows that's like, I feel like that's one of the most powerful forms of freedom. And we know that. It's like in a capitalistic society, we know that. So give people an economic base. All the other stuff is like, yes, that's great. But it's like, hey, at the end of the day, people need to be able to navigate in a society that's structured around capitalism.
Right.
To be able to thrive in the game that's here. And when I look at all of like the treaties that were promised and then broken for folks from like the early I actually just watched a movie about that called The Revenant. And that was like tough to watch. And it was it's a bunch of stuff around the revenue that was done wrong. But even the idea that here were the promises that were promised to people and then broken, when it came to compensation and land, which now is like land is the number one indicator of generational wealth. Like, yeah, that keeps happening. So as we like celebrate the day, I think going way back to the original question of like, should we celebrate or look at the facts? It's like, let's also look at these facts while we celebrate. You know what I mean? Because it's like, it's a lot of stuff here that we got to get right, that we have not gotten right, and continue to get wrong and don't acknowledge that we got wrong. That's the part. If we were honest, like, this ain't just the land of the free, actually. But really, it's like the fake land of the free, but we don't say that, though. Okay, at least they telling the truth.
Right.
But it's like, no, we kind of lying. You know what I'm saying?
You know, if I think about that in New Zealand and in Australia, like similar to the American Indian boarding schools, like they had something similar that they did to the Indigenous people, the Aboriginal people in New Zealand and in Australia. And then there has been, from my understanding and perspective and what I've seen there, a significant effort by the government to say, oh, whoops, hey guys, look at this terrible thing we did. Like, there's museums, it's taught in schools, it's publicized largely. There are monuments and memorials for these dehumanizing things that we have done to the Aboriginal people, the Indigenous people of these lands. And we need to talk about it a lot, because if we don't talk about it, we're going to do it again, and we're going to make this mistake in a different way. So everybody in elementary school, everybody through their lifespan, like, let's talk about it. Look at this. They've made, tons of films, and they show them in like these broad theaters. Like, here are the things we've done to these people. And I don't know if there are other ways that the government is trying to repair and restore and heal or not. But I know just that way feels huge, because I know that for myself and for a lot of people who I know and love very much, like, our experience just is erased. And this, it's like gaslighting almost. It makes you feel kind of crazy when like everybody around you is telling you something that you just know is not correct, but like nobody will acknowledge it. It's bananas.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Listen, I went to Montreal, and so in Montreal, very similar thing happened where like there were Indigenous folks, the French, and the I think it was the French in the UK. So don't get me wrong, came through, and they were at war for the land that was not theirs. And I went to a museum, and the museum had it like, and it had me in there like, okay, I'm gonna go do my own homework. It's like, yes, so the French and Britain arrived, and England arrived, and then the Indigenous peoples gave the land and left, disappeared. I'm sitting here like, they just got up and left. I'm like, damn, that's okay. How generous, right? Like, wow. It's like, we know that didn't happen, and I could not believe that was in the museum. It's like, wow, I was in there tight, and it's like when you go into one of those, like, it's the very first thing you walk in. It's like this 3D visual that tells you a story. And that was like one part of the story, but that stood out to me the most. It's like, what? I couldn't even watch the rest. It's like, okay, I'm checked out. Because now I know the rest of this it's cap. Like, why would we sit here and lie?
No one takes accountability.
So, yeah. Okay, soapbox. I mean, my second one for the day, y'all. So how do, you mentioned celebration earlier, like both. What are ways that you know that people do celebrate or have celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day?
So I think that like Indigenous Peoples Day itself, this specific day on the second Monday in October, something like that. I think that its history is relatively short. So I can say the way that people celebrate this specific Indigenous Peoples Day is like here. Different places do it differently. In Rochester, I know that there is a committee on Indigenous Peoples Day, and that they have events, that these events start with the sunrise ceremony, which is a ceremony that is informed by the practices of the Indigenous people in this area. And then there is a day of engaging in activities that raise understanding of cultures, traditions, and practices of the Indigenous people local to the Rochester area. And then there's, after that day, it wraps up with a sunset ceremony, also informed by those cultural practices. People are invited to come and to celebrate with each other, to engage with culture and tradition in that way. And in lots of other cities and places, in states that do and do not acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day, there are similar ceremonies and events that are celebrated in that way.
Oh, that's dope.
Nice.
Yeah, like what are would you say like the main goals of the day is around connection, community, education? Like what would you think from that specific celebration you mentioned?
Yeah, I think from the specific one I mentioned here in Rochester, it seems to me in my experience that it is about recognition and honoring. It is about speaking a truth and cherishing and celebrating tradition. And it is about getting to live into that tradition in a way that people who come who are not of that tradition get to see, access, and learn about. And also that is widely seen. I think so much of the hurt is the just erasure of our culture. So to be able to live into our culture in a way that is not erased, suppressed, hidden off somewhere else that nobody can see. And sometimes we do need that privacy, right? There are close practices, but being able to do it in that way, that seems what it's about. I know that in other places and in some places that I have engaged with, it's really more about healing. It's about a day of healing within each other and within ourselves, and a day of having space to acknowledge the hurt that comes with the constant invalidation and erasure. And so I think that it can be a mix of healing and celebrating, mourning and grieving, while also bringing joy and sharing.
Yeah, like all those different things kind of wrapped into one. Yeah. I also appreciate you saying like it, you mentioned a few times like this is my experience, this is what I've seen, but it's multiple ways that folks celebrate throughout. So I appreciate you naming that. What do we think are ways that folks who are like not Indigenous can show respect and appreciate and come alongside the culture as well?
That's a great question.
And we don't want to make this just like an interview for you. You know what I'm saying? We don't want to make it like you got to speak for everybody. So we can talk about things that we've seen too. But if you want to start, you get us going.
Please start, yes.
I really appreciate that question. I think it's important, and I'm very grateful that it's being asked. I think something that can be done is learn about what happened. Just acknowledge the history. We've talked about that several times. It is very meaningful to have people say, I am invested in understanding this, and then to try to learn about it, and to try to learn in different ways, not in ways where you find your friend who is Indigenous and then they teach you all about it, right? That is one way of learning. I think that's a beautiful and important way of learning. If they feel open to sharing in that way, they should. It's a great way to give them a chance to speak their truth, because that truth is there's not often space for it. So inviting people you love to be able to share it and holding space for them to do so is a beautiful way to do it. But then also there's other ways to access this information. There are books written by Indigenous American people who describe the experience and the history and the facts. There are lots of different ways to try to better understand and investigate. So I think like a general rule is be curious and approach things with cultural humility. And there are specifics within that, but if you can be curious and approach with cultural humility, I think that's a great way to show. And then also when there are events, when there are celebrations or marches or walks, show up and be there with them. It's if I'm going to walk for something that is important to me, come walk with me. And if I'm going to go to celebrate something that matters and you see that, come celebrate with me. We're social creatures, and to have the social support, the societal support is really crucial. And then I also think I particularly struggle with cultural appropriation. I think the way that our culture was systematically, pointedly ripped out of us in a very vicious way, and then was picked up by the dominant culture and commoditized.
Right.
That's been incredibly painful to watch my ancestors, my family, my elders, the way that they have interacted with and been interacted with around their culture, and then to watch strangers who don't understand what they're holding or what they're doing just freely engage with something that my family, who I love, was maybe beaten or abused or starved for doing. That's incredibly painful. And so I think that sometimes people can like think something that we do is beautiful, and that's awesome. And like being interested in our culture and creativity and traditions, that's invited. But do it in a way where you're trying to understand what it means.
Right.
If you like burning sage and smudging, like that's so cool. Learn about what it is and why it is and how we do it and the meanings of it, and see if it's something that you are invited to participate in or not. If there are things that you want to bring into your home, and it's something that you've been invited to, get it from an Indigenous artist. Get it from somebody who made it, because that is a piece of them and a part of them. I think that supporting our culture in that way can be a beautiful integration rather than an appropriation.
No, that's real. Because I remember some years back, they were like, dressing up as an Indigenous person for Halloween is not okay. And I cannot recall the like level of light bulb that went off. It's like, yeah, there are a bunch of things that people will do and think it's, yeah, go ahead. It's fun. It's cute. And it's not. And I find myself boycotting more. Right? Like over the years, when I learn it, I apply it. And I think that's important. If you learn it, don't just, learn something new today. It's like apply it and then like share it. So like I boycott certain movies. I have stopped following certain like actors or directors because of the material that they're putting out and the trope that they're pushing, the stereotypes. When I learned as a closed practice, I don't do anything that has anything to do with them. Like, this is not my culture. This is not about me. I can learn about it, but I shouldn't just be doing it to do it. It's like certain things, and I don't rock with that. Or I'll correct people. So like anytime someone says, "Oh yeah, because it's Columbus Day," I said Indigenous Peoples Day. Indigenous, and for the most part, people take it well, or they're like, "Oh yeah," like, because that's what it is.
Yeah, or people that say like, "Oh, we're gonna go have like a powwow."
Right.
I'm like, oh yeah, we gotta like, let me check that. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me. So it's like, yes, I agree. There's times where like that's the more you know, the more you can help educate. And there's times where I would have said that. So it's like, let me educate. Bring people on board. And then also, I'm gonna go back to this. It's like, how can I spend in a way that's gonna support? You know what I mean? It's like, yes, when it's time. Or whatever it might be you want to really support, I think resources into the community is like one of the best ways to be able to support. And that's why I appreciate what you said about like, yeah, if you want to go get whatever it might be, like just where'd you get this sage from or this dream catcher? Like, what are you doing? One, that you learn and know about what you're doing, and two, like who are you supporting through that?
Right.
Like, are you actually, and you're trying to help with the positive intent, actually having a negative impact because it's not doing it, So
like know where you're buying from.
Yeah, resources. That's important. I hate to keep bringing it to that, but it's like
money is power.
That's important in our structure until it changes.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's good. All right, so we got a couple more questions. Okay, we can work through this.
We can work through this.
All right, we can do this, y'all. All right, so first, are there things that and this wasn't on the list, so be ready for this. Are there things that people have you learned things? I know y'all. It's okay. We just freestyling now. That things that people should like. I love that you mentioned. Hey, you mentioned like sage, for example, just a closed practice and having like being educated around that. Or I mentioned like certain terms folks shouldn't use. Are there things that we know that people should like stay away from doing? So appropriation. You mentioned like dressing up. What are things that we know that folks probably should stay away from? Right, that actually have the opposite effect of what maybe they're trying to get at. Because there are people who have great intent, like, "Hey, I want to help support," and it's like, that's not supporting. You know what I mean? Other things that we've seen and know that we can help our audience.
I mean, I mentioned it one time when I went to a Thanksgiving dinner, held by some people.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Very kind white people, and the history that they had learned that day in church, which now shared to us. And it was some of the most lying, uncomfortable type of truths that they were holding.
The pilgrims came in.
You know, and it's like, hey, if you want to have a family dinner on Thanksgiving, wonderful, but let's please not pretend. Let's not lie to ourselves and act like, yes, the Indians, like, no, they did not come and say, take our land and hear all these things. It's so frustrating. And so, like, you know, we got this little speech and, you know, this little pieces of corn and told that we would not have made it without this from the natives.
Oh boy.
And I'm like, first of all, I wasn't here. I was not here. The way I got here was very problematic, but sure.
Yeah, like, listen, cuz.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like we wasn't around. Actually, we was, okay.
And then to just act like, yeah, our diseases didn't come and just kill all these people, and then we just killed the rest.
And then took the land and Trail of Tears it up.
So, I mean, I think I'm not a fan of that holiday for what it has become as like the representation of American values. I think that's one of those things where if you're going to do it, actually learn about it, understand what it is, and let's honor it correctly, because it's ridiculous. That's just me.
So what I'm hearing you say is like something we should not do is spread misinformation.
Yes. I love how you synthesize that, because I'm like, I'm too angry to make it make sense.
Nah, but I got you. So yeah, let's be aware and let's make sure we're
Summarize
not like perpetuating to continue with things that are causing harm. Yeah, I'm with you.
Something that is particularly challenging is not only was our culture, were there just highly effective attempts to erase us and our culture, but also the effects of things on us now are not widely looked at. So if you think about research generally minimally includes Indigenous Americans. Right. And we have very little information about how our healthcare system, our economic system changes in cultural advancements like technology. We have very little information on how that impacts Indigenous Americans. And I could guess, and I could give you, emotionally loaded reasons why that is. But what I can say for sure is that there is limited data and interest and information on that specifically. Yeah. So I think if you are going to do something, ask yourself how that affects everybody, including Indigenous Americans, when you're making that decision. If you're going to do research, look at that. If you're going to make a big change to your business or a big change to your healthcare system or a big change to an app or something with, ask how that's going to impact us, and then factor that answer in to the decision. I think that that's something to do. So what not to do there would be like, don't forget that we exist.
Preach that.
Hey man.
Yeah, I like that.
I ain't even going. Hey man, we can stop right there. So yes, I think in our time, I think what I'm really getting at is like the day is really a representation. Well, first, because I think we did this in order. We do need to cancel Columbus in the way that we do it now. And then from that, the actual celebrating of Indigenous Peoples Day, like a launch point into this like journey of discovery, understanding, support, which comes in many different factors. And so like the day can be celebrated in multiple different ways, where there's like connection and people contribute resources and people like learn and come together. But then like it can't stop there. It can't just be, I've done this for a day and now I check the box because I performed. It has to be actually like, this kicks off a journey into understanding more and doing more, right? That's what I think I heard here today. So, yeah. And then the other thing is, people might be listening right now.
I saw it coming. I did.
Hey, I tried to get you.
It was the look down.
I was talking about right there. People might be listening right now thinking, what in the world are they talking about? Listen, y'all, we might be right.
We might be wrong.
But at the end of the day,
we just young, black, and figuring it out. Tough.
CC on the track, boy.